5 things that we learned from week 4. So this could be non-Clemson things or Clemson things, but we kind of tried to stick to college football in general. But what's your first thing, or we'll start from the bottom, right? 5 and go up. So what's your number 5 thing that that you learned from week 4?
My number 5 thing is Old Dominion is a tough out. Okay. They seem to be playing these teams pretty tough. I always like to pick Old Dominion to cover the spread, and I'm absolutely kicking myself. I didn't pick them to cover this past week. I had it on there and I took them off, and of course they covered. But they seem to be a tough team that seems to jump up and bite people. Obviously, they covered against Virginia Tech maybe earlier this year. I think I can't even remember exactly who it was. I know they beat Virginia Tech outright a couple of years back. So they seem to be giving people fits for sure. But I like what I see from Old Dominion. They're a tough out. They play hard, and I like to see them week to week. So they're kind of my go-to when I'm looking for an upset.
I like that. I picked against the spread. I think against Old Dominion. Was it the Virginia Tech game or early on in the season? I think they played Virginia Tech, or they played somebody early on in the season, and I picked against them, and they almost won the game. Yeah. And so it kind of scared me. I was like, oh, man, I forgot last year they actually did win the game or something like that. So I was like, oh, man, I should have remembered that. I got to go. I'm starting to do that with the spread. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but if you go back with the spread and look at like kind of the historical record, you can kind of, I don't know. I'm just guessing. I don't know what I'm doing really. But my number 5 is that the 2 Florida teams with backup quarterbacks are actually doing better than they were with the quarterbacks they started with. And what I mean by that is Alex Hornibrook over at Florida State and Kyle Trask over at Florida both got a victory, and both seem to be doing pretty well. I know what you're going to say. Oh, Florida beat Tennessee. You can't brag on anybody who beats Tennessee, and I'm 100% with you on that. But considering the fact that Philip Hotdog was going to be their big-time quarterback, and he got injured, unfortunately, a pretty nasty injury. I think they didn't even play the replay because it was so bad with his ankle. But Kyle Trask has come in and hadn't played a lot of games, but came in and he's been doing pretty well. Same thing with Alex Hornibrook. Man, Alex Hornibrook went 75% completion percentage against Louisville. I actually picked Louisville, and they burned me on that one. He also had over 250 yards passing. So I read a couple of things from the Florida State side of things, and there's a lot of people and a lot of articles out there saying, hey, we're actually better off than when we had Blackman, and we're actually excited about the North Carolina State game. We're going to show up, which they really haven't showed up to any game. Have you seen the stadium? Yeah. Haven't showed up to a lot of games, those fans. Not really been a pretty good time in Tallahassee. But they're excited about this NC State game. And so I'm not going to give you my pick, but the Florida State fan base, it feels like that they're going to be turning the corner a little bit and starting to win some more games. And they're actually excited about Alex Hornibrook, even though he hadn't played a lot in a while, and he was a transfer from, I believe, Wisconsin. So that's something interesting for me that I thought coming out of week 4.
Yeah, sure, no doubt about it. Like you said, I was never a big believer in Felipe Franks, or as you like to call him with Qualk and Kelly, Philip Hot Dogs. But so I'm not super shocked that they're doing a little bit, I don't want to say better necessarily, but I mean, they beat Tennessee, like you said, which is nothing to brag about too much. But same thing with Florida State. Obviously, Louisville's a terrible team, but Hornibrook had a good game, and I think anything that can provide Florida State fans with any kind of hope right now is a good thing. So, if you're a Florida State fan, that is. So, I definitely agree with that point. As far as number 4 is concerned, all right, look, number 4 coming up, Michigan isn't very good. Okay. My suspicion from the beginning, and your suspicion as well, is that they were very overrated. Now, in fairness, I tend to believe they're overrated pretty much every year. But I think it was put on full display when they got just punked by Wisconsin this weekend. I think they ended up winning by 3 touchdowns, and it probably could have been worse than that. They lost by 3 touchdowns a couple of weeks ago. They took Army into overtime, I believe it was, and I was really pulling for Army there. I thought they were going to pull out the victory. I know we were cheering for them really hard, but Michigan is just not very good, and that's one of the things I learned from week 4.
And man, I'm still burned over that Army game. We both kind of picked them to do the upset. I'm an Army veteran, so I was pulling for them. I felt like that Michigan was a pretender. way overrated, and they definitely are. Shea Patterson doesn't know what he's doing most downs. Seems like he's kind of lost. Sometimes he does good. Sometimes, most of the time he does bad. They don't have a running game to rely on at all, and they can't stop the running game. And a lot of people said, oh, well, they couldn't stop Army's running game because it's the triple option, the wing T style. They couldn't stop that. They'll be able to stop the other running games. No. I mean, I said you couldn't stop Army. Who thought? There were a lot of experts that picked Michigan.
Yeah.
To stop Wisconsin with Jonathan Taylor, who's a Heisman Trophy candidate, and just running all over everybody. Well, man, he really beat them up bad. Wisconsin was amazing that game. I'll talk more about them later. But, I felt like they were disaster really against Army, and I felt like it was going to keep going. This is a really tough year for Jim Harbaugh. I believe he's on the hot seat, and a lot of people are calling for him to be fired now. And I feel like he's kind of a showboat type of coach, anyways. So I've never really liked him myself. But yeah, Michigan, I agree with you. That's my number 4 as well. Michigan is a horrible team, and we told you. Number 3 for me is, I think, going to be a little bit controversial, but I'm not buying in on Auburn right now. They beat Texas A&M, but Texas A&M lost their number 1 running back, Corbin, when he played against Clemson. And they really don't have that good of a running game. They have a true freshman in Isaiah Spiller, not really, a very explosive or consistent running back for sure. Kellen Mond, hey, we know he's inaccurate and inconsistent himself. And Jimbo Fisher again. Alan, did you watch this game? Again, I know you were probably tailgating, but
I was out.
he waited. I mean, they're down multiple scores, and he's waiting until Jimbo Fisher is having them hike the ball with like 2 or 3 seconds left in the play clock. There's no sense of urgency for Texas A&M, and it just baffles me. You're down by that many scores, and you don't try to hurry it up against Clemson. And then you turn around and you play against Auburn and you don't try to hurry it up. You just, hey, we're down by 14. No big deal. We'll just keep waiting till the last second to do anything. It just drives me ridiculous, really nuts. I mean, I just can't believe it. But that's my number 3.
Number 3 for me is, we spoke about this a little bit just a second ago, is Tennessee is a train wreck. All right. They are every bit the dumpster fire they get credit for. Okay. They just can't do anything right over there. I don't even see how Jeremy Pruitt really survives much longer, and he hasn't even been there very long. I just think Tennessee has too much history, to kind of stay down for this long. We are in a world where it is instant gratification. All right. Fans want success, and they want it now, especially at a school like Tennessee. You have 100,000 fans there, and you have the support. You're in the mighty SEC. They love to talk about that. I just think, if he's not careful, he's not going to be around for too much longer.
Yeah, and I had high hopes for Jeremy Pruitt because he seems like a pretty good defensive coordinator, but he might be one of those coaches that are really good as a coordinator and just really bad as a head coach. We're kind of actually, on a sad note, seeing that from Chad Morris. He doesn't seem to be doing very well as a head coach over at Arkansas, having some difficult games. Now people are starting, we talked to an expert back in, I believe, March from Arkansas Fight over at SB Nation, and he was saying, we're going to give him a little slack. We know he's still working things out, but now with the quarterback controversy and then with struggling against non-SEC teams and FCS team, it's not good for Arkansas for sure. I'd like to, I don't wish any bad luck on Chad Morris. I wish that he would do well. It's just going to be difficult over in the SEC West. We know now after 4 weeks that the SEC West is really the strong side of the conference, and the SEC East has really Georgia, I believe, maybe Missouri. I'm not buying Florida yet, but yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough in Arkansas because you're going to have to play LSU, you're going to have to play Texas A&M, you're going to have to play Alabama every single year. There's no maybe not this year. So it'd be tough for any coach for sure. But I thought Chad Morris was going to do better. Same thing with, like you said, Jeremy Pruitt. Tennessee is one of those schools that you would think they could recruit and think that they would be consistent, but seems like they're just not very disciplined right now and struggling a lot. Walt Deptula just said, hey, just wipe the slate clean. Just go get rid of Fulmer because he is kind of like your root cause of everything, and then get rid of Pruitt, obviously. And then just kind of start over fresh with maybe a younger coach that maybe from, who knows, maybe from a Tony Elliott or something. I would hate to lose any of our coaches. I don't think that's going to happen. But, I know that a lot of people are looking for Clemson coaches to come and walk away and become head coaches. So, and I know Dabo Swinney, we talked about this before. He anticipates it happening eventually. So we got to say goodbye to our great coordinators one day. But my number 2, Al, is something that we anticipated. It was September 21st, Missouri versus South Carolina. Kelly Bryant in 2017 at Clemson threw for 272 yards, 2 touchdowns, and beat the Gamecocks 34-10. He turned around in another Tiger uniform, a different Tiger team, and ran for 77 yards, threw for 227 yards on 2 touchdowns, and beat them again 34-14. So good job, Kelly Bryant, for taking out the Gamecocks on 2 different Tiger teams. I think that's got to go in one of the little Tim Beret tidbits, one of his little fun quizzes that he likes to do.
Yeah.
I was excited to see Kelly Bryant be successful and beat up on our rival.
Yeah, no, of course you always want to see that. I mean, happy for Kelly. I'm glad he had a good game against them. They he looked pretty good. I only got to see a little bit of it. Obviously, I was leaving, like true fans, to go watch the game live in Clemson. So I didn't get to see all of it, but I saw some crazy plays in that game. It just looked like it was brutal on both sides. But I think Kelly came away with some pretty decent stats. Regardless, he got the W, and I'm good with it for sure. My number 2 that I have is the Central Florida talk for the season is done. Okay. Kelly Gramlich actually mentioned this on Qualk Show the other day. And I wanted to text in and tell her, hey, you're going to hear a very similar opinion here, on Wednesday night, because I agree, totally agree. Central Florida has built this reputation as a big time team, regardless of whether they didn't even make it in the playoff last year. They were undefeated. It's just they keep getting left out. And, people are talking about that. It was last year, the year before they got left out. So they just keep winning. They keep beating big teams. They're getting huge wins, and still they're not getting the recognition they think they deserve, at least. But, they got beat by Pittsburgh, okay, who's a team who is not very well thought of. Obviously, they're in the lowly ACC. So to get stunned by Pittsburgh, I think it was the final 35-34, something like that. It was a 1-point victory, I think.
Yeah, 1 point.
That is just, it's a crazy upset. Nobody saw it coming. I think you can just kind of, put them to rest for this season, because if you lose to somebody like Pittsburgh, when you have everything going against them that you already have, I don't think there's any hope for hearing anything about them the rest of the season.
Yeah, and they started off really slow. Pittsburgh came out hot, and then at the end they did the Pitt special, or whatever they wanted to call it, where it was basically like the Super Bowl with the Eagles. But a lot of people want to talk about it was their old Chad Morris play, where I believe it was like Taj Boyd or somebody to the end zone and so Clemson really kind of did it many years ago. But it's obviously one of those popular plays where you do the double reverse and then throw it to the quarterback in the end zone, and they ended up winning the game there. But really, they seem to have control. I felt like Pittsburgh, is a decent team in the ACC. It's hard to kind of pick out decent teams in the ACC. You have Clemson, of course, Virginia, but they got a big test coming up, and then you've got who else? I mean, you got North Carolina. Maybe
count Notre Dame. Maybe
can you count Notre Dame? We should. Maybe we should force them to be in football.
Yep.
And then Pittsburgh. Really, I mean, Pittsburgh's kind of they held Penn State into a good game. So it's hard to say, but yeah, one of those things where we were kind of anticipating. Oh man, here's another year where Central Florida is going to go up the rankings and not lose any games, and then still be left out. We're going to hear about how they're the national champions and didn't play in the playoffs, but obviously, like you said, that's over with. So for me, my number 1 is, and it's hard to say this because they played Michigan. But my number 1 thing I learned from week 4 is Wisconsin, to me, is the real deal. I mean, that Jonathan Taylor guy is a really good running back. They have a really good offensive line. Their defense looks pretty stout. Number 1 in the nation in scoring defense 4 weeks into it. Number 1 in third down defense. Number 1 in time of possession. Number 1 in pass efficiency defense. Number 2 in turnover margin. And number 2 in the nation in first downs allowed. I mean, that's a lot of big-time stats there for this team. It's got a great defense. They can run all over you. Heisman candidate running back there. I actually don't mind Wisconsin. I think they're a great team. I've always admired Wisconsin, and they're kind of like a team that I kind of pull for when Clemson's not playing, kind of thing. But I really feel like I'm always iffy about teams kind of up north. Being able to compete, with the times where Alabama's blown out teams from up north and LSU's blown out teams. So I'm kind of iffy to say I like them and I think they're a contender. But I really feel like I rewatched that game, even though it was Michigan and I beat them up just a few picks ago. I really feel like Wisconsin is a good team overall, and I'm excited to see what they can do the rest of the season.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's funny, those defensive stats you were kind of throwing out there sound a lot like Clemson's from last year. They have a really good defense. The running back is crazy. Jonathan Taylor is incredible. There's a big case to be made that he may be the best in the country. Obviously, we have a little Travis Etienne bias over our way, but teams are selling out to stop Travis Etienne right now, and he hasn't got the yardage that he's used to these past couple games for sure. But I like Wisconsin. I think they're a possible playoff team. If they can keep it up, obviously they got some big games ahead of them. My number one is actually that anything goes. Okay, anything goes in college football. Southern Cal upsets, number 10 Utah. Pittsburgh upset Central Florida. UCLA came back against Washington State to beat them. And Southern Methodist beat TCU. I don't care who's playing. You can be beaten every week. A lot of people want to talk about Dabo Swinney and give him a hard time, when he talks up these teams who we think are garbage, in his press conference every Tuesday. They want to talk about, yeah, he's crazy. We're going to beat them by 100. Listen, there's a reason he does it, and it's because it's true, okay? He understands that we outclass all of these teams on paper, all right? But you can't go into any game thinking you are going to just out-talent and outplay him just because your name is Clemson and that's what's written on your jersey. Okay, you have that paw on your helmet. It doesn't work that way. And Dabo knows it, and we are very blessed to have a coach that knows it with such parity in college football.